Hi, my name is Ron Nash. I'm with the City of Toronto Business Improvement Area, and the BIA office is part of Economic Development and Culture. What I'm going to cover today is mainly BIAs, how they work, how they operate, some of the benefits, some details around governance especially. It's something that a number of people aren't familiar with. Many people are familiar with BIAs, but their operations, it's an important part of the work that they do, and how they do it is especially critical. To the basics, what is a BIA? A BIA is created by the City of Toronto, similar to local arena boards, TTC, Toronto Police, library boards. Are all agencies, boards, commissions of the city to undertake the work that the city can do, but these boards are more reflective of the areas and the priorities of the city. And they're also more responsive. They can respond quicker than the broader city overall. A BI is defined by boundary. So, for example, along Eglinton, 5-6 block area, a BI is operated or run by a board of management, and the board of management is a volunteer board. The members are not paid. The membership consists of property owners, commercial and industrial property owners, not residents, and also business tenants within that boundary are also members. BIs are self-funded. They raise their own funds through the members. The members pay the BIA levy. Some of the objectives, the purpose of a BIA mainly is to improve the local economy. They want to create thriving, competitive, and safe business areas for the member businesses and also area employees and the residents around the BIA. Some of the core BIA functions, as basic as promoting local economic development, street beautification, and also area marketing and promotion. And from there are additional priority activities that BIAs undertake also. Not all of them, but depending on the area, some BIAs may choose to focus on events. Those of you who are familiar with most of the city events that you hear about, they're almost all BIs that are producing those events. Some BIs focus on advocacy around issues that focus on their membership. If it's perhaps street cleaning or property taxes, for example, that could be a focus of some or all BIs. Graffiti and poster removal, safety and security is a growing area, and others. The list can be very long, but the main point is that each BI will focus on its own priorities reflected by the membership and the local geography generally. Next, I'll focus on BIA policies and legislation, essentially BIA powers. Where do they get their power from around what they can do? That comes from the City of Toronto. The City of Toronto Act determines exactly what City of Toronto does, City of Toronto staff, and by extension, BIAs as a local board of the city. They're also governed by the Toronto Municipal Code. Chapter 19 spells out the rules and regulations specifically for BIAs. There are many other chapters in the Municipal Code. Some focus on libraries, how they operate, for example, issues related to procedures. So that big binder that identifies everything for BIs also covers everything in more detail around how the city operates. Another key piece is the code of conduct for local business. That's how the boards, generally the directors, the board members, operate primarily. Overarching is some provincial legislation that also covers BIA. So, for example, municipal conflict of interest around BIA directors not having conflict in terms of their personal or non-BIA director, how they operate, Municipal Freedom of Information, Municipal Elections Act, under a Human Rights Code, and for BIs that have staff, it's legislation around employees, etc. So there are many pieces of legislation that determine how BIs operate. And then there's governance, how BIA power is exercised. And some of the key principles include it's democratic. How decisions are made, it's based on voting, majority rules. Ensures that also the integrity of how the BIs operate and also integrity of directors is also an important piece. The fiduciary duty, generally you're supporting and representing your membership. Decorum, transparency, confidentiality, and nonpartisanship. You're not there to support any particular party or any individual politically. So you're there to support the membership. I have a few points that are really important here. Key BIA limits. I'll just spend about a minute on these. What's important is what BIAs cannot do. Spend funds that are not accounted for in their council-approved budget. BIAs cannot go into debt, or also BIAs cannot borrow money. They cannot offer, provide political support to any individuals or parties, advertise or pay for political advertisements. BIs cannot take a position contrary to council policies. But also an important part of this is when the city's developing policies, we often consult with BIs because they're a key partner in again, the development of the city's economy. We quite often work with the BIAs to consult. So at that point, yes, if we're making a major policy change, we consult with the BIAs, get their input, etc. That feedback loop is very, very important to make sure that policies reflect, or there's a reasonable compromise, reflect what both parties want. But that's where there's an input. But at the end of the day, once the policy is adopted by City Council, BIAs cannot go work contrary to the policies. Structure of a BIA. Generally, structure, superstructure. There's a board of management. The board of management represents the BIA and the general membership, meets regularly, makes decisions on behalf of the general membership. The directors, individual directors, are representing the board. They're appointed directly by City Council, and they make decisions. They meet generally monthly, no less than 4 times a year, and meet to make decisions, carry out the BI's program that's agreed to annually. The general membership, they inform board priorities at the annual general meeting, and also throughout the year, there's a general feedback loop where boards, where there's a liaison, the general membership can meet with the board, have their say in what goes on, but the structure mainly is board meetings and decision by the board. And then finally, some BIAs hire staff, and they're there to support the board, not all, because the boards, they're volunteer, they're taking their own time, and staff is always important to do a lot of administrative work and carry out the board's program. How does the BIA operate? One of the key frameworks we use is Robert's Rules of Orders, a formalized way of conducting meetings and making decisions. Without it, it would just be a conversation. So you want to formalize, how long someone can speak. You want to make sure you stay on agenda, respect people's time. The moving motions, this is what we all agree to. This is what I want to have adopted, make sure the wording is properly, and then going back to that principle, it's a democracy, everyone gets to vote, majority rules. So if a majority of people agree to a point, then that's adopted. However, once that motion is agreed to, then the directors are expected to comply with that. You may disagree, but publicly to remain together as a strong force, not as a divided board, remain silent, or you can continue those discussions, but it's important because that's a board position that's agreed to by a majority. So ongoing feedback is important, and as part of BIA operations, general membership, annual general meeting. How does a BIA raise funds? A BIA develops an annual budget, working through understanding what happened last year, where you may need additional funds for your program. If you want to do festivals, if you want to do more marketing, branding, rebranding, etc., that's where your funds come from to do that. So the BIA presents a budget based on the program, what they want to do for the coming year. That's brought forward by the Board of Management to the general membership to vote on. Once that's approved, then staff brings that to City Council for final approval. And once it's approved by Council, the total amount is divided into a specific amount for each property owner. It's not a flat rate. The amount that each property owner member pays is determined by the value of the property. There are 3 factors. It's the value of your individual property, commercial, not residential, commercial or industrial, the total value of all the properties within the boundary, and the BIA budget. Those 3 factors will determine how much each member pays. That amount that they pay is added to their final property tax bill. You'll see a line item for property tax and a separate line item for BIA levy. They send that amount back to the city. We take it and then we give it to the BIA. That's the budget, the amount they agreed to. If it's the budgets range from as little as 7,000 for a BIA to up to 4 million. We take that amount back for each BIA, give it to them, manage, carry out your program for the year. So that's where the funds come from and how it's collected and put back to the BIA to do their work that they agreed to in the program. And at the end of the year, each BIA is required to prepare an audited financial statement, and that's also approved by council, so we understand the finances and that everything is running properly. Moving along, just want to talk to you about general effective meeting practices. I covered on a few points, but it's as basic as how do you run a successful BIA and successful administratively and with governance. Boards must be well prepared, having agendas, meeting minutes, and all of the background required to make decisions. To do so at the board meeting. A board meeting shouldn't run more than 2 hours, hour and a half ideally. So you want to do your homework and you're not starting a discussion, starting research at the meeting. A good BIA will have very, very efficient meeting where all the work is done prior to the meeting. And this involves subcommittees. A BIA can strike a subcommittee for their priorities. For example, if streetscape is a common one, marketing, promotion. So the subcommittee members who are made up of board members and or some of the general members, they'll form a subcommittee, do all of that homework, bring it to the board, and present what they want. They'll say, we want to do this, and here's the background, and they'll have a debate, discussion, and make a decision. So that's important of committees of the board. Directors, it's important that they adhere to procedures, act honestly and in good faith, and follow support the final decisions of the board. The good practices of general membership, again, attend the annual general meetings, or there may be special meetings, and that, as I mentioned, that feedback loop when the board comes out, understand, or if there's a survey, etc., participate, because clearly the board is as effective as the input from the general membership. And then also mention staff. Staff is also the backbone providing support to the board and the membership. I'll cover just basically some of the city of Toronto support for BIAs. What we do primarily is help new BIAs. We have 85 BIAs, and there's a growing list of areas that want to become BIAs. So that's another process. And also some BIAs want to expand their boundary. So again, that's a formal process undertaken through polling, etc. So we spent time doing that. We also provide professional advice and support to BIAs. We're kind of the front window to BIAs. So various issues that impact BIAs from various divisions. We field issues, questions. If we can't respond to it, we bring in someone from a different department to help to understand issues, questions, etc. We also assist with strategic plans, creating streetscape plans, budget preparation, planning and coordinating the capital projects, the street improvements that you see. Again, I mentioned festivals at the top of this discussion. Most of the festivals you see are produced by BIAs. Also, some of the unique street improvements you see across the city, that's BIA produced, developed, and installed with support from our division. If the city were to do all of the streetscape improvements across the city, it would probably look very common, like this. Most of the tall street lights that you see, same across the city. The stop signs, the same, everything. But when a BIA is present and they want to brand the area, that's when you start to see unique streetscape installations. It's really good. So that's usually how people start to understand what's different here. And it's a BIA. Also, our office also helps organize and conduct annual general meetings. We also work on issues management, conflict resolution, and, as I noted, mobilizing other city departments. We have a number of financial incentives that complement the BIA's budget. The BIA's budget is primarily for their operating, marketing, promotion, maintenance of the improvements on the street, and also for the capital improvements on the street. The BIAs pay half of that, and we also fund half of that. But over and above, there are a number of grants for BIs, for murals, streetscape plans to plan the type of improvements you want to do, a vision for your area. Have a grant called Transit Expansion Construction Mitigation Grant. There's a lot of major transit LRT projects going on. We have grants for BIs to help mitigate that construction, and it's quite open, whatever the BIs feel it's important to them, if it's research, if it's doing marketing, or perhaps coupons, etc. Anything the BIs feel that is important to them, there's funding there for them to come up with something unique. We also have a Main Street Innovation Fund, similarly for innovative approaches to BIs, because we see the BIs are extremely creative with us. We can develop policies and programs, but some of these programs that we've developed is all through a feedback loop, hearing from what the BIs want, and then we create a program. But the Main Street Innovation Grant is, we don't have to create a new program. It's there, but we are open to funding unique initiatives other BIs can benefit from. And these grants are for BIAs, and then there are individual grants to businesses. There's the Commercial Facade Improvement. That one's been long running for over 30 years, and probably the most popular one we always sell out. Any business that wants to improve the front or the facade of their property, there's funding available to undertake those improvements up to about $15,000 a year. And there's also a grant program for interior space. That's called a Commercial Space Rehabilitation Grant. If you're fitting out your space, subject to conditions, etc., you can go on our city website to see all of these grants. City of Toronto BIA office, financial incentives, and it will take you to the site with a long and extensive list of grants, but those are some of the most popular. Because we're speaking of Black businesses in Little Jamaica, just want to clarify the Little Jamaica area. It's a very broad area, as some of you may be aware. The boundaries aren't set. So the broader community is the area from Marley to Keele, north to approximately Lawrence, and then south to about Rogers Road, just north of St. Clair. But for our purposes, for BIA purposes, we're looking at the commercial corridor along Eglinton. And from west to east, we're looking at the Eglinton Hill BIA, from Keele about 5 blocks in that vicinity. Fairbank Village BIA, that one is just west of Dufferin for about 5 blocks. The York Eglinton BIA, that one is on the east side of Dufferin along Eglinton to Marley. And then Oakwood Village BIA, that's on Oakwood, south of Eglinton. And then more specifically, the York Eglinton BIA, that's the core area of Little Jamaica. And more recently, that BIA, the board voted to rename the area to Little Jamaica BIA. So the broad area from Keele to Marley is Little Jamaica area, but the Little Jamaica BIA, subject to council approval, will be the core area between Marley and Dufferin. And more recently, some of the activities that the BIA has undertaken. A year ago, they did a major production, the Little Jamaica Festival. They had approximately 200,000 people come out. That's the first major event that the BIA did since pre-COVID. They've been doing a lot of smaller activities, but that's a major one. They've developed a new brand. They did a study over the last couple of years and finalized. They adopted a new brand for the area. You've probably seen that. It's being rolled out with banners and new look, etc. And as I noted, the renaming came out of that brand based on a survey and recommendations. They've done some holiday events. They've secured funding from Metrolinx to undertake different initiatives. Also, they've partnered with different event producers they've supported organizations doing events in the area. In addition to that, they're working with the city to develop a public realm strategy to determine the future look of the area. And then rolling out from that will be selected improvements. But they've gotten started already. They're working with us to do some improvements to one of the local intersections over time. And I hope that that helped you with understanding BIAs and how they work. But by all means, it doesn't end there. You can always reach out to Ron Nash, City of Toronto BIA office, if you have any questions or require further information. But we're really proud to work with the city's BIAs and support the work they do, because they really represent and reflect Toronto's neighborhoods. Thank you.